Since I already have a serverless, so I'm directly going with running the serverless command. Okay, it is currently giving option to create different type of projects like Node.js starter, HTTP API, and all these type of projects that are available. Once you select it, it will create the basic code for, suppose if you see SQS worker, right? It will create and give you the basic code to connect to a queue and read the data from the queue, trigger the lambda when there is a message or something published to the queue, it will trigger the lambda. So that type of basic logic it will give along with the project creation. At the same time, Express API also, it will provide the REST API features to the serverless project. Okay, there are more also, and in this right now I'm selecting right now if you see Node.js and Python, but it supports a lot of different frameworks also. Okay, now I'm going with the starter project of Node.js. In this tutorial we'll focus on Node.js first. Okay, I just want to go with the same AWS Node.js project. So now it is creating a basic template of the project. Okay, so now the project is created. Right now I am in the project folder and there are three files, readme file, index.js and serverless. Let's open this project within the Visual Studio Code and we'll look at these three files. Right now I opened this particular project in the Visual Studio Code. Okay, if you see, the first file that we need to focus is serverless.yaml. Okay, this is the service name. Okay, when we deploy this application to AWS, it will create the CloudFormation template. Okay, anything that you want to deploy into AWS, you need to create the CloudFormation template. Okay, so basically CloudFormation template is little bit complicated. Okay, to understand. So instead of writing the direct CloudFormation template, we are going to write the serverless.yaml. When we actually deploy this application to AWS, it will automatically generate the CloudFormation template out of this serverless.yaml. So whatever the configuration that we put as part of this serverless YAML file, it will create the CloudFormation template based on whatever the configuration from this file, and it will create the CloudFormation template and deploy to the actual AWS. So in serverless framework, it won't directly deploy this particular file. Instead, it will generate the CloudFormation template out of this serverless.yaml file. Okay, and this is the version 3. Okay, and if you see this provider, so like I said, serverless framework supports different type of clouds. So right now, whatever the cloud that you want to deploy to, you need to set that here. Okay, if it is AWS, it will be AWS, otherwise Google and Azure and all the other different names, provider names. Okay, and the next one is the runtime. Okay, this is the runtime Node.js 18. So when we deploy this application to AWS, it will run on only Node.js 18. If you want to upgrade to Node.js 20, again we need to change this to 20. Okay, then it will, when it is build, when we run the build, it will build the code as per this particular version instead of 18. Okay, so for now let it be for now let this 18 there. Okay, next one is functions. So this is the actual place where we write our actual AWS Lambda functions. Okay, whatever the function that we write here, which is Lambda function. So the Lambda is a specific piece of logic it will execute. Okay, so these are the functions. This particular function will be deployed to AWS Lambda. So its name will be called as function 1. Okay, and if you want to add more functions, you can add it, but this indentation is important. Okay, and this is how you should add one more function. If you see, this is the index file, it is referring to this file, function name is handler. Okay, let's go here. Okay, when we hit this lambda, it will go and hit this particular function. Okay, right now what we have, there is nothing in this. Okay, if you want to create one more lambda function for handler 2, okay, all we need to do is okay, you need to say handler 2, that's all. Okay, let's add handler 1, handler 2. Okay, this is how you can write the lambda functions using serverless. Okay, if you want to add some specific libraries, okay, this right now there is no package.json. Okay, use the AWS services. Okay, we need AWS SDK installed, so let's add this AWS SDK. Okay, npm install AWS SDK. When I write -- save, it will create the package.json and it will make the entry of this. Okay, now if you see, as soon as this is done, it created the package.json, okay, with the dependency, and it created the node modules. Within these node modules, it downloaded all the whatever is the required dependencies, okay, from the package.json. Okay, this is the basic stuff, and if whatever the permission, whatever the libraries that you want to use in this particular project, you can make those entries here. Okay, and lambda functions will go here and configuration will go here. Okay, now if you see, the structure would be within the, when we hit this particular function, within the index file, it will hit the handler function. When we hit the function 2, within the index file, it will go to handler 2. Okay, this is how the routing works in this. Okay, now let's look at how we can run this particular lambda from local. Okay, run the lambda in local, serverless invoke local -- function and the function name. So right now I want to hit this function 1. Okay, so now if you see the response for this particular function, status code of 200, okay, it is from handler 1. Whatever is the data that is part of this index, okay, request body, whatever is returned, this is returned. Okay, the same way we can hit the lambda function 2 also. So this is the way to run these lambda functions in your local to validate. Okay, once it is done, if it is working fine, so all we need to do is deploy this lambda to the AWS. Okay, so to deploy we need serverless deploy. Okay, but right now we didn't set up the AWS credentials yet, so that's why it won't work, it won't deploy. Okay, now if you see, it is not working because right now what it is saying, the security token is not included in the request. Okay, since we didn't set up the AWS credentials. Okay, and once we need to create the AWS user and get the credentials, access key and secret key, and set up those credentials in our local folder, in our local computer within the .aws folder. Within that, the file name should be credentials. Okay, so within that credentials file, we need to set the access key, secret key, and the region that we want to deploy to. Otherwise, it won't work.